Nice to be here at Brown Bag Lunch Day at the historic Clinton Engines Museum. I am going to talk about theaters today and the history of theaters in Maquoketa. The first theater goes all the way back to 1886. At that time, it was called the Odeon Theater, and it was called a theater, but in those days it was mainly a place to put on live productions, traveling shows that were coming to Maquoketa and moved on to other communities. That same sort of thing happened very near the Odeon Theater, across the road, across the street at the Opera House. Many of you remember the Opera House. It was located where the Goodwill store is located today. But the Odeon Theater goes back to 1886 and mainly called a theater but used for live productions, kind of like the Onward Fine Arts Center has today. The first real movie theater in Maquoketa was the Orpheum Theater, and it goes back to the early 1900s and was located in the Masonic Building. The Masonic Building is the one that's right next to the Boy Theater. Actually, it's the building that was the home of the cinema movie rental store for a long time, and now we use it as more or less a storeroom for the main theater. That was the Masonic Building. It's a large three-story building that has on the top of it a little auditorium all by itself that people used to crawl up to and go to dances or whatever. So there's a big room at the top of that building, and there are apartments on the second floor, and the first floor was the Orpheum Theater. And then that gave way to the Pastime Theater. I think you all recall the Pastime Theater. And it goes back to in the early teens of 1900. It had a fire. It had a bad fire in 1915 that destroyed the theater, but it was rebuilt and it reopened, the Pastime did, in 1916. Stuart Peak and his wife and his father-in-law, William Hippler, came to Maquoketa after being in the theater business for about 8 or 10 years, I guess. Decided to come to Maquoketa, and they bought the Pastime Theater back in 1921 and operated it for many years. They then bought the Orpheum Theater a short time after that and decided that the Orpheum needed some remodeling, and so they did that. And then when business wasn't doing well with both the Pastime in town and the Orpheum remodeled, they had then, by the way, labeled it as the New Orpheum Theater. Business wasn't very good there, so they made it into a miniature golf place for quite a few years. And then when the miniature golf thing kind of came to a close, it wasn't popular anymore, they closed the Orpheum, the New Orpheum, and it stood vacant as a theater for quite a few years until that same location in 1948 was made into the Chief Theater. I'm sure many of you remember the Chief Theater. It also was located right next to my theater right now that was the Cinema Movie Rentals. So it lasted for just about 3 years. It opened in 1948 and it closed in either 51 or 52 thereabouts after a short run. As I said, up until 1929 there were movies shown in town on a regular basis, but they were silent movies. The first sound movies came in the year 1929. The Peaks were quite well known in the community. Stuart Peak was kind of a goer. He played a lot of golf. He was involved in Chamber of Commerce activities, and they always said that if you want to get the job done, you'd call upon Stu Peak to get the job done in his own way. He had a wife whose name was Bessie, and Bessie Peak operated the theater with him, and she was known in those days as the beautiful bird in the gilded cage, because she always got herself ready for selling tickets. Now those were in the days when the ticket selling was done outside on the sidewalk. You didn't go inside the theater. You walked up to the window, and through the little mouthpiece, you would tell how many tickets you want, and there was a little place where she'd slip the tickets through you through a little slot at the bottom. But she always made herself look perfect. She would fix her hair, put on makeup, she would wear the best of clothes, and like I said, she always wanted to look her best when she sold tickets. Another thing about Bessie Peak, they tell me, is that she basically knew every kid in town, and the kids knew that. So there wasn't anybody sneaking in at the wrong age, because Bessie Peak knew their age, and they weren't going to pull something off on her. The pastime then was remodeled in 1939. I even came across a architect's drawing of it. So they did an extensive remodeling job in 1939, and that's the way the Pastime Theater then looked for the rest of its life until 1972. It was a large theater. The Pastime was located where the dental clinic is located now. The Main Street Dental Clinic, operated by Dr. Atienza. And that's where it was. It was a large building, about probably 50 feet wide, and deeper, so deep in fact that it went into part of the alley. You had to drive around the back of the theater. That's how long it was. And it sat around 640 people. And it had a very small lobby. You'd come in the small lobby, and it was just basically enough room to visit the concession stand. And as soon as you bought your popcorn or candy, you went into the big auditorium and sat down. It did not have a balcony. It just had a projection room upstairs with the projector operator, and there were a few seats up there, but no balcony like many of the old theaters had. There was a second story to the Pastime Theater, and it was used for a doctor's office, a beautician's office, and a dental office. I think there were two offices that were located upstairs at the Pastime Theater. Interesting thing about the Pastime, it had a projectionist whose name was Howard Brinker. Howard Brinker had only one job in life, 40 years, and that was to be the projectionist at the Pastime Theater. And he was there, I guess, 6 out of 7 nights a week, had a substitute one night of the week to give him a day off. And he lived in the area of Briggs School, and he had a son, and I believe the son is living today and lives somewhere in Europe. He had a radio in the projector booth that he listened to Chicago Cubs games, I guess, and I still have that old radio, have it in my office, and it still plays. In those days, the film would come in just as it does now, in 20-foot sections, or 20-minute sections, and you would put the opening film in one projector, and the other one that would play next to the next projector. And so he had to take the heads off of it, of course. So Brinker would cue it, would thread it up and start the first 20 minutes. And then there was a little dot in the right-hand screen, which sometimes you can still see today. And when that dot appeared in the right-hand upper screen, that was his signal to start the other projector. And then as soon as the second dot came up on the right-hand screen, that was his signal to push a button with his foot. And that started the projector and got them meshed together, so you never knew it switched from one projector to the other. As soon as he got that second reel going, he would take the first reel off and put it on a rewinder and rewind it, get it ready for the next show, and then get the next, the third reel going. This is the way it went, back and forth every 20 minutes for 40 years. And those days, the movie generally started off with a newsreel. Didn't have TV in those days, and those people who wanted to see what was happening the last week would be treated to a newsreel by Fox News or somebody like that. Edward Hurley, I think, was a famous broadcaster in those days that did the narration for those newsreels. They would last maybe 3 or 4 minutes and have some of the top news of the past week. And then they would go into, like we do today, into previews of coming attractions, and then the movie itself. Those days, because movies were so popular and there wasn't much else to do, there were no gambling museums, no big concert halls, and etc. So movies were so popular that people wanted to go often, and they had the movies at 7 and 9 o'clock every night, Monday through Saturday, and the matinees on Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon. So they had a lot more showings of a movie than we have today. The movies were not rated in those days. You could basically pretty much depend on it being a pretty good movie for the entire family. They didn't have R-rated movies that you had to worry about with your kids in those days. They also had a very popular feature that came up, maybe it was one night a week, I guess, And that was bank night. On bank night, when you went to the theater, your ticket could get you the bank jackpot for the evening. And I guess that would build if the person wasn't present, because once you had your name in this bank night drawing box, you were there until the jackpot was won. So there were some pretty big jackpots. And in fact, they tell me some nights the theater would fill up. People would still want a chance for bank night, so they'd buy a ticket anyway and stand outside and wait until the bank drawing was held. Well, the government put a stop to that when they said you can't have a promotion that you have to be present to win. And so eventually bank nights came to an end. The Pastime Theater was operated by, Bess and Stu Peak for quite a few years. And when I came to Maquoketa back in 1958, it was then operated by a short, gray-haired gentleman by the name of Jim Gray. Some of you probably remember Jim Gray. His wife was a beautician. She had a beauty shop upstairs. And he operated the theater for the first few years that I came to town. And then there was another manager after that I'll talk about later. And the Pastime Theater, then when the Hippler and Beek, when Mr. Hippler died and Stuart Peak and Bessie wanted to retire, they sold the Pastime Theater to a theater chain out of Des Moines. And from then on, they operated the theater and had local managers and local people to run the Pastime Theater. Then, in 1971, we heard about Ed Kirchhoff. Ed Kirchhoff never had been in the theater business, but he had made an arrangement, or had a deal going, I guess you would call it, to build a new Schultz Brothers variety store in Maquoketa and move it across the road, across the street from where it was. So he bought the Pastime Theater in 1972 from the Des Moines group with the intent of tearing it down and building the new store there for Schultz Brothers. I, of course, at that time was operating the drive-in. I'll get to that in a moment. But because I was in the theater business then a short time as operator of the drive-in theater since that past spring, businessmen contacted me and wanted me to save the theater downtown. They said, we can't lose our theater in Maquoketa. So I got together with Ed Kirchhoff one night at his home, that big brick home that he lived in, and we negotiated a deal whereby I bought the old Pastime Theater from him and the equipment with the idea that I'd use it at a different location. So I bought the Pastime Theater from Ed in the fall of 1972, and I operated the Pastime from October 1st, 1972, through the rest of that year, and then through January 31st of 1973. And during that time, I had started work on the Boy 3 Theater, actually the Boy 1 Theater at that time, in downtown Maquoketa, and it wasn't done at the end of January. Stockham and Son were building it, and they had hoped to get it done so there wouldn't be any interruption, but we were without a theater then for all of February of 1972 and all of, or part of March. We opened the Boy 1 Theater, only one auditorium at that time, in March of 1973. So the town was without a theater for about 6 weeks. The Boy 1 Theater was located, or is located, where there was an implement store for many, many, many years. It was an International Harvester implement dealership. It was run by, I'm trying to think now.
Harold Millwright.
Harold Millwright. Harold Millwright was the operator of it. And then Dostal and Waters came in to operate it for a while. And then when they moved to their new store, which is now the O'Reilly store, I think it is, on Platt Street, then that building was vacant. And so I decided that's where I'm going to put the new theater in Maquoketa. We actually gutted the building completely, took it completely down, and put the new theater in its place. And so we operated that one auditorium, brand new theater, for about 1 year in 1973, before Mel, Stiles, and Bernice decided to retire. Mel and Bernice had the Stiles Cleaners right next door to the theater, and Mel is living yet today. He's in his 90s. And I had all of my laundry done by Mel and Bernice in those days, and so I knew them pretty well. And when they decided to retire, here was the situation that came about. Well, somebody else may want to buy that cleaning business and keep running it, or some other business might decide to go in there and remodel it and make it into another business. And if that happened, that would eliminate the possibility of me ever having a second theater, a second screen. Because back in those days, in the early 70s, it was becoming quite popular to not have just one screen, but to have 2 or 3 or more screens in the same location so that you could show a variety of movies at the same time with the same staff. That was becoming a popular thing. Well, I talked to Mel and worked out a deal whereby I bought his cleanering business and I sold it at a public auction sometime later after it was closed. And so I took his building and converted it into the second auditorium known as the Void 2 Theater. We used part of the building, the front part, and the other part in the back was new. So in 1975, we opened the Void 2 Red Auditorium with almost as many seats, 200 seats. And Maquoketa was one of the first towns, if not the first town in the state of Iowa to have what was then known as a twin theater. And at about that same time, in fact, it was the winter before that, December before that, that a man by the name of Robert King was managing my theater for me, and he decided to move from the community, so I needed a new manager, and I hired Jack Jones, fresh out of college in Dubuque, to be my theater manager in the winter of 1974. We hadn't opened the Void 2 yet. So Jack has been with me that long as the manager of the theater and basically takes care of 90% of the business of running the theater. Then it wasn't too long after that, well, it was about probably 5 years, that the Napa Auto Store next door decided to close, and Tom Pekash bought the building where it was in. And then I heard that some farm person was going to open a tavern or a rock music place for his daughter so she'd have something to do. And I thought, oh, come on, I don't need a rock music place right next to my theater. So talked it over with my wife and decided, well, I guess we're going to try and make another theater downtown. So I rented that building, which was known as the old Knights building. I rented that in 1980 and from Tom Pekash, who had then been the owner. And so we made the front part of that into a ice cream store, the Cinema Ice Cream Store. And the back part of that was made into a small theater known as the Void 3. Cut a doorway in the wall and made it into, now Maquoketa definitely was the first small town in Iowa to have a triplex theater. So we had 1, 2, and 3 theaters starting in the summer of 1981. Interesting thing about the ice cream store, I made the ice cream store, Cinema Ice Cream Store, and had a decor of theaters. Everywhere you looked was a theater decor. We really had it looking nice, had automatic soft serve machines and walk-up windows. Larry Hager put a nice outside film looking sign out there. And I knew after the first week that I made a mistake. In those days, that's 30 years ago, I'd spent about $75,000 to operate the Cinema Ice Cream shop, and it was not working. And people were not going to eat ice cream downtown or come indoors to buy a cone, not like the Dairy Queen. So I had to do a lot of experimenting with that business over the years. I made it into a game room where people played Pac-Man, remember the Pac-Man game, and Donkey Kong. We converted part of the building into that. Then later on, movie rentals, where you rent a movie and take it home and look at it on your TV. We converted it into a movie rental store. And that's about the way it lingered on until about 6 or 7 years ago when we completely shut it down and just use it now as a storeroom. That was a little side note about the front part of the Void 3 known as the Cinema Ice Cream Store. So the Void 1, 2, and 3 Theater have been operating ever since 1981 as a triplex, and we have tried with 3 auditoriums to always have some of the top movies available, and so we get the movies as quickly as we can because people like to see a movie early as soon as it comes out. It's had all of the publicity, and they want to see it early, and with the triplex theater we were able to do that. Now I'll back up a little bit and talk about the drive-in. That's how I actually got started in the theater business. Here I was pretty busy operating the radio station and having fun. I had just opened also the Savannah radio station. I built that in 1971 and was driving back to Savannah back and forth a couple times a week to run it, and really hadn't thought about the theater business. But I had coffee at the Green Mill. You remember the Green Mill? That's where I had a lot of my early meals on a regular basis, George and the Green Mill, and sometimes got a little bit of Christmas candy when I walked through the back way. He'd say, anytime you want, you go ahead. But anyway, a lot of stories about George. So I was in there having coffee one morning with Bud McKenzie. His dad was known as Catfish McKenzie. Some of you remember him. Quite a wheeler and dealer in the town. And Bud was his son. He had a sister, Dorothy, who worked at the newspaper. And Bud had been operating the drive-in theater for 10 years and was going through a divorce and decided he no longer wanted to run the 61 drive-in. And he convinced me over a cup of coffee that I would be a good person to operate the 61 drive-in because it would be a business that none of my advertisers would be offended by if I was running a theater because there were no other theaters in town. And also he knew, of course, that I could publicize the theater quite a bit on the radio station at no charge, so it made a natural tie-in. So over a cup of coffee, I bought the 61 drive-in theater for $22,000. Went out there with my father-in-law. I also needed another reason, and my father-in-law, Arnold Meyer, was just having the early stages of MS, and I knew he was a person that liked to be busy. So he was happy that I put him to work out there to work at the drive-in along with his wife Helen, my mother-in-law. So they immediately went out there and they needed to have a lot of work. I might have bought it for $22,000, but I think I got a Roger Stewart loan for another $10,000 to fix it up and get it ready for the 1972 season. There I was, in a short time, becoming a movie person in Maquoketa, and then later on that same fall, getting the downtown theater besides. The actual starting date for the 61 drive-in dates back to 1950, and that's when two couples decided to build the drive-in where it's located now. And we're talking about Dick and Betty Franklin. They owned the farm, and the other couple was, help me out now, Walt Allen. Mr. and Mrs. Walt Allen lived here in town, and Walt had a history of operating theaters. He had operated the one in Lost Nation, he had one in the Quad Cities, and so he, with the Franklins, decided to build a 61 drive-in theater, and I'm sure it was a reciprocal thing where the Franklins donated the land, and Allen, Walt gave the expertise of running it, and they started the building of the theater in 1950 in the spring, and they got it open in the summer of 1950, not a full season, and it's been in operation ever since. It was a 250-car drive-in in those days, and in those days they still had the speakers outside that you hung onto your car door, and so you knew exactly how many people you had in there when there was a car in every speaker. They also had a lot of success. Drive-in theaters after World War II were becoming very, very popular. People were able to buy cars again, and people wanted to do things now that the war was over and they had their new car. And so all over the country, drive-in theaters were built around 1950. As many as, I think, 4,500 was the maximum amount of drive-ins, and most of them were built, as I said, between 1950 and 1959. And then years later, many years later, when all of most of the drive-ins were built at the edge of town, not like mine out in the country. They were built at the edge of a town, and when the big box stores came along, like Walmarts and Targets, those stores were in need of a good piece of property for parking, etc. And what they would actually do is go up to a theater owner and make him an offer for their land that was so good they couldn't turn it down. So hundreds and hundreds of drive-in theaters closed up just because the owner couldn't refuse the amount of money he was being asked to for his theater property. Others may have closed for other reasons, but that was basically the main reason. So it went down to a situation where today we have not 4,500 drive-ins in the country, it's down to around 400. Here in Iowa, there were one time there was about 50 different drive-ins around the state, maybe more, and today we have just 4 left. The one at my drive-in, there's one at Newton, there's one south of Muscatine, and there's one out in the Great Lakes area. Those are the only 4 drive-ins operating right now. At one time, the Quad Cities had 5 operating drive-ins at one time, and all 5 were at least twice the size of mine. And so we have a lot of people in the Quad Cities who you might say are really drive-in fans that still like to bring their kids and grandkids up to see a movie at a drive-in. So, because of the new highway, 61 being 4-lane and Davenport now being only about 40 minutes away, about 7 or 8 out of 10 cars that come to my drive-in are from the Quad Cities. It's almost like it's a Quad City theater. And the same way for Dubuque. Dubuque is equally distance away, 35 minutes away on the 4-lane. Dubuque had 3 screens once, and it was a big drive in town. So we get a lot of people coming down from Dubuque. So once again, you could go out to the drive-in on a busy night and have to look for some Jackson County cars. They're overshadowed by Dubuque and Scott County cars, and some come as far away as Scott County and Delaware County, long distances, just to be able to take their kids or grandkids to see what a drive-in is like. There were times in the drive-in when we played not the family-type movie. We played the R-rated movie and the ones for the young people. We even had dusk to dawn shows all night long, 2 or 3 times a year. And then we switched over about 20 years ago to family situations, and we really do cater to the family right now. In fact, the families come as early as 6:30 for a 9 o'clock show. They want to get here early so they get a good front row seat. They bring their own food. They tailgate in front of their vehicle. Some of them bring along a couch or lawn chairs and portable radios, because now the radio sound is what's used for the movie. You don't need the speakers anymore. You just tune in the radio sound on your radio. And so you can sit outside your car with your radio, portable radio, people bring all kinds of contraptions from entire beds to some pretty elaborate seating arrangements to watch a movie. And the kids have fun in our swing set. We have a big swing set. We have a kiddie train to give them rides from 7 o'clock until 9 around the perimeter of the drive-in and the rubber tire wagon or the train. And just a couple years ago we thought, well, let's try sandbox. We put a big sandbox out there. I thought it wouldn't be very popular with mothers, but they haven't complained. And you'll be surprised how many kids fill that sandbox every night until movie time. The drive-in has been a very fun experience. It got a really big lift. It was pretty slow for many, many years. But then when the other drive-ins started closing down and the screen blew down by a windstorm in 1995, got a lot of publicity in 1995 when that windstorm blew the screen down, because TV stations and newspapers came in from all directions to make interviews with me and put me on television saying, are you going to reopen the drive-in? And at that time, right away, I wasn't sure. I hadn't checked with my insurance and so forth. So I said, well, we'll have to wait and see. And I did check with the insurance company. I had a little bit of insurance money coming. The bank said they'd make me a loan. And so I did decide to put up a new $50,000 screen, and that's still up today. And so we opened the drive-in then about a month later after it blew down. And then when I opened, I get all kinds of publicity again from the TV stations coming in and filming the reopening of the drive-in. So I got a lot of what you call really free publicity in 1995, and that really gave it a lift, along with Bill Wondrum coming out one night and walking around with his wife, and he liked it so much that he gave me a column, and things really started mushrooming then. So even though the drive-in was really a very quiet and not a very lucrative place for many, many years, it was after 1995 that things really started to pick up, and now it is doing very well, and the drive-in helps support the downtown theater. So that basically kind of brings you up to date on how the theater business has progressed in Maquoketa. It's been a fun business all along. I never have really made a lot of money at it, but I've managed to keep it going and also present a good variety of movies to not only Maquoketa but the surrounding area. Things are starting to wear out just this year. I had to put a new rubber roof on the Voy 1. We put new seats in the third auditorium here a couple of weeks ago, and have some other things that still need to be done. The big thing that's going to happen in the next year or two is a little scary for me, and that's that we're going to be doing away with film entirely. Movies now are going digital, in that there will not be the movies shipped in 35 millimeter, that wide movie. They will not be available here in about 2 or 3 years. Everything will have to be digital. The movie will actually come in a hard drive box about this size, and you'll run it into a computer. There won't be any film to put together anymore. You'll just have to program the movie through a computer and through a very complicated system that puts the screen, the picture on the screen as bright as it is now and even brighter. The only problem is it's very expensive. There was a firm in Texas that invented it. They want their take out of it. Every projector sold. So we're talking about $60,000, $70,000 per screen to convert to digital. And I have that facing me. Obviously, with 4 screens and $60,000 cost, you see what's ahead of me. I guess I'll probably start off by doing one at a time, and gradually I get along until I get all 4. if I want to continue having movies for the KMAQ area, and I would like to do that. So that's a whole new thing after having a film for all these years, over 100 years, to go actually to a theater that doesn't have film but has hard drive digital technology in its place. A lot of things have happened in our world because of digital, as all of you know. So there are some exciting things about digital that are coming. It'll be easier to put films together. They'll be cheaper to ship. There'll be specialized programs come available through satellites. They'll also be able to send us things through satellite down into our projection booth and put that on the screen, like we might be able to do a Broadway musical production some Sunday afternoon from the satellite right in the theater. So there are some pluses coming with it, but it is going to be expensive getting started with it. Well, let's see, our time is running by on us. One of the things that I give out by the hundreds every year are movie passes, free passes to go to a movie. I get a lot of requests from people that are at the head of proms. They're very popular. I give away thousands of tickets to proms and church organizations, and I have some free tickets I'm going to give out today because we're going to have a little trivia, if you don't mind, and I have some free theater tickets to the people that can talk about some of the old days of movie going. All right, let's see. Let's talk about the first biggest movie in 1939 was a movie about the South. Gone with the Wind. Barb's our first winner.
My favorite movie. And that theater was packed when
the theater was packed for Gone with the Wind.
But when they came
even after that, when they showed it at the pastime. Gone with the Wind was a terrific movie, and that was a winner of the Academy Award back in 1939. You'll want to not walk in front of the camera, Paul. You'll want to go around in the back to give out these tickets. But or you can give them out later, probably. Well, yeah, because otherwise you'll be blocking that camera over there too. Okay. Then in there was a movie where the man said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." Remember that movie? Who was the actor that said that?
Clark Gable.
Who said it?
Clark Gable.
Clark Gable. Okay, I'll give it to this lady there, Clark Gable. That stunned the people. My goodness, what did he say? Think about what it's like today when you go to an R-rated movie today, or even a PG-13. All right, that was the famous actor, and we all know what a great career that he had in the movie business. Westerns were very popular in the old movies. There was a famous star in the Westerns on a regular basis. He appeared here in Maquoketa at the Jackson County Fair. Who said it? Gene Autry, right over here. Okay, from Springville, gets that free ticket. Gene Autry was in a lot of movies, and of course we all remember him being the singing cowboy. There was also a very popular Western movie star that made many movies. There was a big fella.
John Wayne.
John Wayne, who said that? All right, be sure that we'll get a ticket to her. John Wayne was one of the really big attractions to movies. Made a lot, and he's from Iowa. Winterset, Iowa is where his birthplace is, and you can visit it there. John Wayne. The head of a horse was put in the bed of a gangster in what movie? Godfather. Who said that? All right, we got a Godfather ticket over there. There were 3 or 4 Godfather's movies, and they were all popular. I think that that head was in the very first movie. The Greatest Love Story. The star died of cancer in the movie. What was the name of that movie? Love Story. Okay, and who did it star?
Ryan O'Neal.
All right, you're really doing well. Ryan O'Neal and Ally McGraw were in the movie Love Story. It did a lot of business for me at the 61 Drive-In Theater. There was a great actor who was in the Air Force and played the lead role in the Glenn Miller story. Jimmy Stewart. You already won. Somebody else had that? Okay, who else said that? Jimmy Stewart. Raise your hand. Okay, Belle Tubbs said Jimmy Stewart. She gets a free ticket. Next, we have, what famous movie was he in? Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to go to the next page here. The actor that suddenly died in Davenport while visiting the community. Cary Grant. Who has that? Eddie Ortel. Yes, and it was Cary Grant, one of the great stars of the past. Had a heart attack or something in Davenport and was in the news for several days. She starred in many movies with Rock Hudson, was also a singer.
Doris Day.
Doris Day. Who didn't get a ticket yet? Who said Doris Day? On the end, did you say so? I think you did. Doris Day, on the end there. After a while, you'll have to raise your hand so Paul can give you a ticket. Doris Day, whatever will be, que sera, sera. That was in the movie The Man Who Knew Too Much, one of my favorite movies of all times, where she was missing her boy, and she started singing in this mansion, and all of a sudden she heard him singing with her. It was quite a movie. And Jimmy Stewart was in that movie as well. There was a movie that lasted 17 weeks at the Boy 3 Theater. That's a record that'll never again be equal. Which movie do you think that was? Come on now, it wasn't too long ago. It was a tragic thing in 1909, I think. The Titanic. Who said that? I have a Titanic winner. The Titanic was a great movie, won about a dozen Academy Awards. It was a long movie. It lasted almost 3 hours, and I remember having to work 2 or 3 nights a week while I was playing, and I thought it would never get over every night. But it lasted until then, and it went for 17 weeks here in Maquoketa, which is a record that'll never, ever be broken. And a great movie, The Titanic. And let's see. What actor from Maquoketa appeared in a movie called Fist? Ron Delagardelle. Who said it, Mark? All right, Mark gets a ticket. Ron Delagardelle lives here in Maquoketa, was one of the minor stars in the movie Fist, which was filmed up in Dubuque. And do you remember also about that movie, what we did with it? We had a premiere at the Boy Theater. We had a big night where the stars were brought in a limousine and ushered into the theater. We had hors d'oeuvres and we had champagne before the movie. We had a big party to unveil the movie Fist in Maquoketa that starred, as you said, who did I say? Sylvester Stallone. There was another Maquoketan that was in that movie. Derwood Goldman. Did you say that, Mark? Yep. Yeah. Derwood Goldman didn't have as big a part as the one that Ron Delagardelle had, but he also was in the movie, and he liked to talk about it. Okay. Going back to the old days, after Jim Gray was the theater manager, there was another manager for quite a few years, and then he, when I bought the theater, didn't need his services anymore, and he started selling real estate. Any idea who that might have been in the theater business a long time? Now, Cliff Lindblad is one of them. That's right. That would be right.
Was Russ Sinta there?
Russ Sinta. Barb's got it again. Russ Sinta. Interestingly enough about Russ Sinta, he sold real estate, and he came up to me one day and at the radio station when we were above where the cafe is now, 136 and a half South Main, and he said, "Dennis, I got a nice building for you that would be nice for you to locate KMAQ in." And I said, "Well, let's talk about it." I said, "Maybe I'd like to do away with that long stairway." So Russ showed me the Easton building, which is where I'm at right now. That was a grocery store, remember? Harlan Easton ran it. I don't know what his wife's name was now. But anyway, she had the store and wanted to sell it. And I think I bought that building I'm in right now for, once again, around $20,000. It was a bargain price. I liked it a lot because it didn't have a building on either side of me, and it was right there in the middle. So I bought the building, and it was a Sears store then, and the People's Gas Company was in the other half. And it had only been about a year after that the KMAQ fire occurred, and I needed to move real quick. And so I was really glad that I had purchased that building from Russ Sinta. And we weren't able to move into it immediately. We had to do some remodeling first on one half and then do the other half. But Russ Sinta is the person responsible for me being at 129 North Main in Maquoketa. His daughter lives somewhere in California, I think, and occasionally visits Maquoketa yet. Well, we're out of time. I could go on and on about the theater business. It's been a fun business for me, and I've met a lot of famous stars over the years. We used to go to a lot of movie conventions down in Kansas City and all over the country. Every year there'd be 1 or 2 big movie conventions. The one thing I was getting out of being in the movie business was to, on the expense account, go to a convention. So we'd go to a lot of conventions, and I have an album full of famous stars that I have seen in person and gotten their autographs from. John Travolta and Jane Fonda, I could go on, of the many people that I've met at the conventions. I don't go to those as many as I used to, but it was still a fun thing to do. The movie business is being challenged a lot these days by the big screen TVs that you can get in your home now. The flat screens are 50 inches wide. People are buying those. You can rent movies from the big red box at Walmart for 99 cents and watch them in your home. You can get them on the internet now as well, and of course the dish networks that bring the movies out of the sky. So we have a lot of competition for the movie business, but we still believe that there is still nothing like going to a big screen movie presentation to sit in a comfortable seat and not be interrupted by kids or the telephone or somebody knocking at the door or whatever. When you go to the theater, you can sit down for 2 hours, relax, and enjoy the movie with the best tasting popcorn in the world. And I hope that even though maybe you haven't been to a movie for a while, try and feel young again and go to a movie once in a while and discover what a fun thing it is. You'd be surprised some of the seniors that are now trying out my drive-in after many years. They're coming to the drive-in and they like it. They may not stay for both movies, but they'll stay for the first movie until 11 o'clock. And of course there's always the dating public. How many people didn't take their first date to a movie? And it's still the place to take that spouse on their birthday or wedding anniversary or place like that. Go to dinner and go to a movie and help support the theater industry so that, like it has in the last 100 years, it's going to continue to be a major entertainment and low-cost way to be entertained for another 100 years to come. I won't be around here that long, but I'm going to stay in the theater business as long as I can, because like radio, I love going to the movies and entertaining people and meeting a lot of people. It seems wherever I go, whether it's out at the drive-in or downtown, people are happy when they come to the theater. I like to see that, and I hope to continue doing that. That's all the time I have for now. Thank you very much for inviting me, and have a good day.